Okay, first thing I'll say about the topic here is I'll hear people say, oh, it's Southern Anglo-Saxon. I said, I ain't no Anglo-Saxon.
We'll talk about that.
My family history, and even my DNA, is majority Celtic, Welsh, and if you go way back, it's called the Dalriadians. They were the people who inhabited the northern part of Ireland and western Scotland. They were the ones who ran the Picts out of Scotland. And the Romans used their word for invader, which was Scoti, which is where the term for Scotland came from. So that's where most of the Michaels was that ancient group that were the original Scotch-Irish in a way.
Yeah.
So, however, I do have some, English in the background and a wee bit of German, and that's it. I have no French. Charles, I'll leave all that to Charles Horay and those fellas with the French stuff. So we will introduce our speaker here, Mr. Ron Kennedy. This may be true of many of you as well. I always grew up knowing I was proud to be from the South, and I was a Southerner, and that was my heritage, and I loved the flag, and had one hanging in my room when I was in junior high and all that stuff, but I didn't really know that much about it in reality until I didn't know what the real causes were and why the South was righteous until the early 90s, and I got my hands on a copy of the South was Right. And that may be true for a lot of y'all. I have a speech I call Confederate Epiphany, how I got into all this stuff, and I always say, I read Grissom's book first, and I was like, yeah, that's right. But when I read The South Was Right, my wife can testify to this, I was walking around the house going, you dang right, that's right. It made me mad.
Good.
It was supposed to.
Stay mad.
So, but since then, both Ron and his other brother, Donnie, have given us a huge amount of information at our disposal. And many of the books they've written together and separately, and all the talks they've given. It's also, I'm very proud to say that we were in one club together. We're past Louisiana Division
That's
commanders.
right.
There's several of us here, myself and you and Donnie and David and Charles and CR. So we have several past Louisiana Division commanders and one future Louisiana Division commander. JC. Oh, and JC. Well, he's not sitting where he was sitting, so I didn't. Okay, there's the coat of a past Louisiana Division. Okay. Oh, there he is back there. He's not paying attention to nothing. He's worried about going to get some chili cheese Fritos. So, enough ado. Let us welcome one of the progenitors of the modern Confederate movement, compatriot Ron Kennedy.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate you. All right, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. And let's see, I've got 45 minutes. That means promptly at 3:30 I quit.
That's good enough.
All right, good enough.
If you want to fish early, you can fish early. Said no one ever probably.
All right. I appreciate all of you being here. Again, I appreciate again, Chuck, your work you've done to put this together, as well as all the ladies and everyone else that's put so much work into putting this great conference on. Now, I want to talk to you today about the South, not the Bible Belt South, which is definitely a part of our heritage, not the literary South, which is definitely a part of our heritage, but about the culture of the South, the Celtic South, which is not the entirety of our ethnicity, because we are a very diverse South. Well, we even have people named Larray, amongst us. I mean, we got French people. We've got all different types of cultures among us. But I want to talk to you about the overarching Celtic culture and what it has meant to us, but I want to talk to you about who we, the people of the South, are, who we are as a unique people, viewed from the writings of 14 different Southern scholars and authors, looking at 13 different books ranging from the date of printing in 1866 all the way up to 2018. So who were these Scotch-Irish men in gray. Who were these warriors in gray that fought for the South? And let's see if I can get this to work. Nope, I can't. Let's see. Advance here. There we go. I found the right button. All right. Who were the men in gray? Now, one of the books that I really enjoy reading was written by Senator Jim Webb of Virginia, and Born Fighting, How Scotch-Irish Shaped America. He said, it's fair to say that the Confederate Army endured as long as it did against such enormous odds because it was so wildly and recklessly Celtic that it did not know when to stop fighting. And its opponents, that is the Yankees, they pressed on steadily to win, and in its aftermath sowed the seeds for a century of hatred and resistance. Yankees thought that victory on the battlefield was synonymous or the same as conquering a region, and more importantly, a culture. And he went on to talk about what we've already heard today about the South as a family. In his book, Born Fighting, he said the Northern Army was most often run like a business, solving problems. The Southern Army was run like a family, confronting human crises. We were and still are a family, defending kith and kin, friends, neighbors, and relatives, whether we're from South Carolina or Mississippi, whether we're from Texas or Virginia, we are kith and kin. Now, no one can say that General Pierre-Gustave Toutant Beauregard was a cracker, okay? You can't say that he was Scotch-Irish, no. But listen, he was living among the Celtic culture, and he adopted the same feeling that the rest had. He said that the fact that one army was fighting for union and the other for disunion is a political expression. The actual fact on the battlefield, in the face of cannon and musket, was that the Federal troops came as invaders and the Southern troops stood as defenders of their home. Very different. An empire invading our home. That was a big difference. Now, who were all these Celtic warriors, these crackers, these rednecks, these hillbillies, these plain folk of the Old South, the Scotch-Irish people of the South? Who were they? In my book, Uncle Seth Fought the Yankees, this is not a promotion because that book's no longer available, but in that book, it's a collection of about a little over 100 short stories, actual events during the war. And in that book, I explain how the South is a land populated by hardy descendants of Celtic people from the British Isles. They had no use for big, centralized, powerful governments. All of our history as a people, Scotch-Irish people, the Celtic people, were a people who saw big government as an invader, as someone who came with fire and sword and raping and destruction and eventual political, if not actual, slavery. This has been the opponents of the Celtic people from ancient times all the way up to today. Their loyalty was to kith and kin, and look, they were well armed, and quick to take advance. Historically, the enemy of the very people that populated New England, the settlers from England. Not just Scotch-Irish, though. Although there's Kennedys and whatevers all across the South, it's not all Scotch-Irish. In ethnicity, no, there's Germans, French, Native Americans, Hispanics, blacks, but they all endorsed or lived under that Celtic culture. Dr. Grady McWhinney, we'll talk about him later, but he noted that even the Germans that settled in the South were influenced by the cracker culture, the Celtic culture, and they became Celticized. And all they asked was to be left alone. One of the great statements in President Jefferson Davis' inaugural address is, all we ask is to be left alone. But that was more than the enemy could allow. Frank Lawrence Osley, as Frank has already talked about, in Plain Folk of the Old South, he looked at the plain folk of the Old South. So who were we? Who are these plain folk? It's not a term of derision. It's a term they use to specify them separate from the aristocracy of the South, the plantation owners of the South. And he said this, and this book was, and I put on these tables, if you want to know where these books come from, there's your good citation to all of them on your table. In about 1948, 1949, he published Plain Folk of the Old South. He said the term folk has its primary meaning as a group of kindred people forming a tribe or nation, a people bound together by ties of race, language, religions, custom, and history. A folk thus possesses a sense of solidarity. Now understand that. A folk, doesn't matter if you came from South Louisiana, Charles LeRae, we have a sense of solidarity because even though I came from Yankee hating Mississippi, we have solidarity. Now, we may complain a little bit and tease each other when LSU and Ole Miss play, but that's a different story. We're all waiting for the time when both our teams beat up on Alabama. We know that, but that's all right. There's a sense of still of solidarity, of family, and that's what makes us a folk. The Southern people, according to these characteristics, were a genuine folk long before the Civil War. And Frank Lawrence Osley, way back in 1948, 49, he said that the plain folk, the Scotch-Irish people that settled the backcountry of the South, these were self-sufficient herdsmen who grazed their livestock on the open range. Grazing of livestock was of greater relative importance in the antebellum South than any other part of the United States. And this is something that too often is ignored, is the fact that the total, in the 1860 census, the total valuation of the hogs and the cattle freely roaming on the South's open range was much higher than the total cash value of that year's cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane crop. So, the idea that cotton was king, no, hogs were king. Let's have some bacon, folks. But that was the plain folk of the Old South. These people made up about 80% or more of the soldiers who wore the gray in the war for Southern independence. Now look at what else Frank Lawrence Osley says. They were leisure-oriented individuals who had little inclination towards hard work. Yeah, we work if we have to, but not if we, if I got my cattle out roaming the open range, I don't even have to build fences. I just once a year have a community party. We gather them all in, brand the cows, notch the hog's ear, slaughter what we need to put in the smokehouse, and then together we'll be hog drovers and drove them to the market, sell them, get the cash, come back, and it's time to go hunting and fishing, boys. What a great life. So relatively few seem to have a desire to become wealthy. Now, this lack of materialism distinguished them from non-Southerners, that is the Yankees, a tremendous distinction. They enjoyed life. Few were wealthy and almost none were poor until the Yankees invaded America. How many of y'all remember Granny in the Beverly Hillbillies? Remember when she was trying to teach Jeff Grove what the Civil War was? And he said, but Granny, what was the Civil War? And Granny slapped him upside the head and said, the Civil War was when the Yankees invaded America. Well, it's true. That's our America. Our country, our people were invaded by aliens, an alien custom, alien people. And there is really a great, look at this. You can't compare Yankees and Southerners, especially New England Yankees. And so there's no comparison. There's only a contrast. A Yankee is much more likely to walk around reading a book, and a Southerner is much more likely to be walking around carrying a gun, or a couple of guns even, or at least have one close at hand. A big difference in the two peoples, the two cultures, something that in and of itself represents the absolute dividing line between peoples and should have been obvious that the two people should be a free and independent nations. But that wasn't the way the Yankees wanted it. Now, one of our great writers post-war was Admiral Raphael Semmes, and if you haven't got a copy of Memoirs of Service Afloat, but during the War Between the States by Admiral Raphael Semmes, you need to. It's a great adventure novel, but he also makes a great statement on behalf of the South and our right to be a free and independent people. But he talked about the difference. And this is in 1866, folks, that he said, this is a year after Appomattox when he published his book. He said, trade occasionally drew the two peoples together, but they were repelled at all other points. Thus, the germs grew. Now, he used the term germs as in germination, not the pathology of germs causing disease, although maybe that might be closer in some respects. But he said, thus the germs grew step by step into two distinct nations, a different civilization in each. And then he quoted Tocqueville, who in about the 1840s was a Frenchman touring America, and he wrote in Democracy in America, he wrote, quote, the northern and southern states were more like hostile nations than rival parties under one government. Rather obvious. So obviously there's a Yankee problem because of the cultural conflict between these two people. You said, well, Ron, you're supposed to be talking about the South, but the Southern people. But you can't understand the Southern people if you don't understand the distinction between the two, those of our traditional enemies and ourselves. Dr. Clyde Wilson, and I inadvertently left his book off of this list, but he wrote a very interesting little booklet called The Yankee Problem, The American Dilemma. Dr. Clyde Wilson is a Southern national treasure. This is what he said. He said, the Yankee, he is ambitious. No, I'm sorry. He said the Yankee, it was not the Union that our Southern forefathers seceded from. Yeah, well, we didn't secede from the Union. What did we secede from? But the deadly combination of Yankee greed and self-righteousness. Different mentality between different peoples. And then he quoted this great statement from a New England radio, a Boston radio public broadcasting station, which they opened it and they said, welcome to New England, where people get together to change the world. This is a part of their mentality. You can't leave well enough alone. You can't leave people alone. And look, this wasn't just something that Clyde Wilson thought of in 2015 when he published this booklet. This is something from the North Carolina newspaper in 1854. They said, quote, a meddling Yankee is God's worst creation. Yes, Jesus. Absolutely. The worst creation. He cannot run his own affairs correctly, but is constantly interfering in the affairs of others, and he is always ready to repent for everyone's sins but his own. 1854. Now back to good old Admiral Raphael Semmes. I love this. This book is just a treasure trove for those of you who want to learn about your cultural history, but also the military history and the naval warfare carried on by the Confederate Navy. But he said, the Yankee, quote, he is ambitious, restless, scheming, energetic, and has no inconvenient moral nature to restrain him from the pursuit of his interest, be that path never so crooked. In the development of material wealth, he is unsurpassed. But he is like the beaver. He works from instinct and is so avid for gain, he has no time to enjoy the wealth he produces. Some malicious demon seems to be goading him on. And he continues talking about the New England Puritan. He says in another place in his book, with all his pretensions to learning and amid all the appliances of civilization by which he surrounds himself, he is still the same old gloomy Plymouth Rock man his ancestors were 3 centuries ago. You know, the witch burners. He is the same gloomy fanatic. And notice that, the fanatic. He is an ideological fanatic. He has the same impatience of other men's opinions and is the same vindictive tyrant that he was when he expelled Roger Williams from his domain. The dragon's egg has hatched a savage that refuses to be civilized. And you folks thought the Kennedy brothers were radical. Now, in 1985, Dr. Forrest McDonald, the late Dr. Forrest McDonald, another great scholar from the South, he wrote an article, and I think it was republished later in the Southern Partisan, why the Yankees won't and can't leave the South alone. And he made several observations. He said the first thing to understand about the Yankee is that he is a doctrinal ideologue. Remember that fanatic. He is incapable of letting things be, of adopting a live and let live attitude. And he will tolerate no departure from his version of truth. He must reform society by turning people of the world into second-class Yankees, and he does it by material conquest. We'll buy them out if we can, and if I can't buy them out, then we'll do it by military conquest by way of bloody bayonets. Now, that's the first thing. Then he said the second thing about him is he's a Gnostic. He views himself as being privy to knowledge of the divine mysteries of the universe to which the New England elite living on that city on a hill in Boston, Massachusetts, look down upon us mere mortals and will give us their instructions on how we are to live. No absolutes. He has no absolutes, whether biblical or constitutional. The Bible may say sodomy is a sin, but no, we have new light, and we transform that into gay marriages is okay, and not only okay, but enforceable by our federal government. Their federal government, not ours. Certainly not ours. They don't believe, if they don't believe in biblical absolutes, then of course they don't believe in constitutional absolute. As a matter of fact, Joseph Story and Daniel Webster came up with the idea of higher law. There's higher law above, greater than the Constitution. Now, by that they didn't mean the Holy Bible. No, that means those ideas emanating from those intellectual New Englanders residing at the city on a hill who have decided what the Constitution really means. In modern era, we call it a living Constitution. There are no absolutes. So this is the difference. This is the difference. And this is the Scotch-Irish people could not understand the people of New England who held these views so contrary to their desires. But again, it wasn't all Scotch-Irish. Even Judah P. Benjamin, the first and only a Jewish cabinet officer in North America, and probably the first one in the Western Hemisphere to have his image on a $2 bill, any nation currency of any denomination. And there's one in the Confederate Museum, so go take a look at it. But this is what he said when a Northerner, a New England, military man came to the South observing the war, and he saw how the Yankees were making war not against armies, yes, but also against women and children and the old and destroying private property. And this Englishman asked Judah P. Benjamin, he said, Mr. Benjamin, why are these Yankees soldiers acting like that? And Judah P. Benjamin said, hey, if they had behaved differently, if they had come against us observing strict discipline, protecting women and children, respecting private property, but they could not help showing their cruelty and greed. They could not they could not dissemble their true nature, which is the real cause of this war. Note that, the real cause. No, you mean it's not, no, not slavery. This is the real cause. It's a cultural conflict. If they had been capable of acting otherwise, they would not have been Yankees, and we should never have quarreled with them. Big difference. Now, Dr. Grady McWhinney, the late Dr. Grady McWhinney from Texas. Well, really, let's see. I know he published this from the University of Alabama, and I think he studied a while in LSU. But Dr. Grady McWhinney wrote Cracker Culture, Celtic Ways of the Old South. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. It's well worth the read. He really explains how the Celts moving into the South really impressed their culture upon the entire South. But he said, and this is a prologue to it written by Forrest McDonald. Forrest says, from 1790 to 1860 census reports about half the white population of the South was of Irish, Scottish, Welsh extraction, and about half of the remainder came from western and northern border shires of England, those shires of England that were greatly influenced by the Scots to the north. The ancient Celts were men who loathed to work the fields. Sound familiar? Loathed to work the fields. They reckoned wealth by the number of their animals. They enjoyed lavish feasts and heavy drinking, instrumental and vocal music, hunting and fishing, poetry, oratory, and frequently exaggerate with the aim of extolling themselves. They are boasters. Yeah, and threateners, and given to bombastic self-dramatization, and yet they are quick of mind and with good natural ability for learning, but above all, they are fierce warriors. MacDonald continues to say, and this is, I think, one of the most impressive points of the entire book, even though it's in the prologue, it's not written by Dr. McWhinney, it's written by Dr. Forrest McDonald. He says, conditions among the inhabitants of the English uplands, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland had long been adverse to the continuation of their traditional ways. But in the American South, migrants from those areas could preserve those ways and flourish. Indeed, in a manner of speaking, their entire history had prepared them to be Southerners. The Scotch Irish are cracker culture in the South. And again, got to make sure that everybody understands that even the crackers, even the Scotch Irish people, we are not Anglo-Saxon. We are not Anglo-Saxon. The WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant label that our enemies often try to apply to us, but that's a total misnomer. White, yes, we are the white population, but even that, I had a friend, an acquaintance that I met in 1966 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Man, I'm losing it. Jackson, Mississippi. I met him there, and he was from Germany and claimed he had served, and I think he did, with the Waffen SS during the war. He was an older fellow. And he laughed at Southerners who were talking about the great white waste. This was back during the beginning, or really about the end of the civil rights movement. And he said, you know, you look in any Southerner's closet long enough, and surely you will eventually find a tomahawk. It's true. It's true. And I say you also look in any African American's closet, and sooner or later, and some of them, many of them, you'll find a tomahawk, but in much more, just virtually every one of them, you'll find little Irish hearts. You know, so there's this great admixture, and that's what he was laughing about. But we are mostly white. We are mostly Protestant, but not entirely Protestant. And this shows you the kith and kin relationship. We don't have a division between religions. You know, we have this acceptance regardless. Look at General Beauregard, Roman Catholic. Admiral Sims, Roman Catholic. The poetry of Father Ryan. Yeah, these are just a few of the many Catholic people of faith who worked with and fought for and are an integral part of the culture of the South. Also, we're not all Christians, you know, even the nominal Christians. We are also have a large Jewish, or we had a very large Jewish population across the South. Of course, Judah P. Benjamin, and this book, if you get a chance, The Jewish Confederates by Robert Rawson. That is a terrific book, terrific study on the Jewish contribution to the Confederacy. And that painting is of Major Adolph, and I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce his last name. I'm too Scotch-Irish. He's with the 12th Alabama, and this is a picture of him, or a painting that did after the war. But listen to what one of his cracker soldiers said about him. He said, "Our gallant Jew major smoked his cigars calmly and coolly in the thickest of the fight." So the idea that the South is full of bigots and people who are just exclusive. I heard one Yankee woman say, "You just don't like anybody that's not like you." And I'm thinking, I like my brother. Yeah. But yeah, I like people that are like me, but I like people that aren't like me. You know, it's no problem. Now, Dr. McWhinney also wanted to point out the fact that to contend that the Scotch-Irish came from the same Anglo-Saxon stock as the English indicates a profound ignorance of the most important cultural conflict in the history of the British Isles. So again, we're not Anglo-Saxon predominantly, and that's not to say there's not some admixture, just like there's some admixture of, the tomahawks in the closet, etc. But primarily, and especially the culture that overarches the South is one of the cracker culture, the Scotch-Irish culture. Anybody here from Florida? All right. Have y'all read the book Cracker, the Cracker Culture in Florida History? If you haven't, you need to. It's a great little book, scholarly work, and in that, this fellow gives a great definition of why we are called crackers. The white South are called crackers, and there's a misnomer. There's something that says that you'll hear Black Lives Matter saying, "Well, that's because these white slave masters cracked the whip over the backs of our black slaves while they were laboring in the plantation." That is such a damnable Yankee lie, and it's absurd. Because if that had been the way they'd been treated, what would have happened when all the men of military age left the plantation? Had been a massive Haitian-style slave revolt. It didn't happen. So what is this term cracker? Where does it come from? This is very interesting to me. The early form of the cracker was derived from the word crack, or the Old English crake, which is to boast. A cracker is a braggart or a liar. Probably talking about, well, no, talking about somebody we know there. But anyway, the word was used in in that manner by William Shakespeare in 1595. He said, quote, William Shakespeare, what cracker is this that deafens our ears with an abundance of superfluous bread? Talks too much. Does it sound like anybody we know? Other than the Kennedys, I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, he goes on and says, well, look, also there's an early use of this word in Scotland. He said, cracker is a corruption of an ancient term used in Scotland to designate a yeomanry class of independents who were obnoxious to the aristocracy. Yes, we've always been obnoxious to the ruling elite. That's our forte. Why? Because we just want to be left alone. We just want to be left alone. Listen to what else he said. During the Spanish and British occupation of Florida, cracker settlers who had a little regard for authority of the crown, whether it was the British crown or the Spanish crown, and they were a great problem for the government. There again, we, by our ethnic or cultural inheritance, have little use for big government. Even if it's run by a brilliant man like Joe Biden, we just have little use for it. Now, he also said that from a Florida, this is a quote from a Florida Spanish document. These crackers are nomadic like Arabs and are distinguished from savages only in the color of their skin, their color, their language, and superiority of their depraved cunning and untrustworthiness, end quote. Now, he also said that these crackers always keep themselves just beyond the reach of all civilized law. Interesting, huh? Interesting. Had no use for big government. Now, the reason the Spaniards referred to these guys from Georgia coming into Florida was because they were coming in covered wagons, but these wagons were not pulled by mules or horses. They were pulled by oxen. Now, how do you drive oxen? You don't put a bridle and a bit in their mouth and rein them in. No, you use what we call a bullwhip. And if you want them to go to the left, you crack over on the other side, on the right side, crack on the left side if you want them to go left, crack right in front of them if you want them to stop, or crack the whip behind them if you want them to hurry up. And by the way, you don't hurry up oxen. They plod a little faster, but if you want them to plod a little faster, you crack them. Now, here's a little quickie for you. Won't cost you anything. You can really mesmerize people. Ask them the first ethnic group to break the sound barrier. The crackers. And it's because that whip, you see that whip? This is Jake Summerlin, the king of Florida crackers. That whip he uses, he'll crack it. And what makes that cracking sound is a lot of people, they used to think it was the tip breaking the sound barrier. But as in later time, they've actually videoed it, and it's the loop going down toward right before it gets to the tip, and he cracks it. But it breaks the sound barrier, and that gives that sound. So we were breaking the sound barrier a long time before the U.S. military. Now, not only Florida crackers, but there was crackers in Mississippi. Here's a Mississippi cracker with his favorite team of oxen, and he's got in his hand, you can't see it, that's an old blurred photo, he's got his whip with him. Now, the reason I know that's his, and he uses those oxen to skid logs out of the bottomlands of Mississippi, and this was taken about 1920-ish. And the reason I know that's his favorite team of oxen, because that's my maternal grandfather. Now, There's crackers all across the South. The 12th Louisiana Volunteers come from North Louisiana. They came in from Alabama, Mississippi. There's a place on the Ouachita River called the Alabama Landing where all these crackers came in. This man, James W. Nicholson, wrote a book about it. Great stories, especially if you got a young child. That's a great stories of Dixie that he did. He ended up he was originally, during the war, Sergeant in Company D, 12th Louisiana Infantry. After the war, he became a chancellor of LSU, but he wrote this book back, and it was published in 1911. But he said that all of us, when we went to camp, no one had to teach us how to use a gun. We were all good with guns. Sound familiar? You didn't have to teach us how to ride a horse. We were all good horsemen. And we were raised in Christian families. Just a great book, but again, the crackers across the South. Now, Grady McWhinney also wrote a book called Attack and Die, the Cracker Warrior Southern Heritage, which again is another great book if you want to learn about the cracker heritage of the South. He said that the South's casualties during the war was as great as any major European participants during the World War II, with the exception of Russia. Said if the North had suffered commensurate casualties in the war for Southern independence, it would have lost more than 1 million men instead of the rather 360,000 Yankees we managed to get before we ran out of ammunition. Now, if you apply the casualty rate of the South during the war to World War II, instead of the United States losing around a little over 300,000 soldiers, the United States would have lost 6 million men. You have a right to be proud of your Southern heritage. No people in America, with maybe the exception of the Native Americans, have bled more and given more in defense of their homeland than your ancestors. And he also talks about the Celtic charge, very important, a key component of our heritage. I also talked about the rebel yell, and he noted this. This is what Susan said the natives who were, this was in France and what's now France and Germany, said the natives at once raised their customary cry and yelling and screaming charged down upon our army and broke our ranks. Now, Donald and I pointed out in the Yankee Empire, aggressive abroad and despotic at home, that only Americans who were truly capable of understanding the arrogant and oppressive Yankee Empire are those Americans like yourself who understand their reality as citizens of a captive nation, the Confederate States of America, and subjects to the Yankee Empire. Pacified Southerners find it hard to believe that their America would engage in a secret plot to overthrow democratic governments and replace it with governments that would help them build their commercial empire. But they did it to the South. Southerners who understand the truth about the, quote, Civil War will recognize the Yankee pattern that was used against our nation, the Confederate States of America, as it played out on the international stage. Quickly, as I sum up, in 1865, this is what Andrew Nelson in I'll Take My Stand, written around published I think about 1949. It's on your handout. He said, since 1865, an agrarian union has changed into an industrial empire bent on conquest. And then John Crow Ransom had this to say in his contribution in that in I'll Take My Stand. What pitiful service have inept Southern politicians for many years rendered the cause. And Frank mentioned Richard Weaver, who was born in North Carolina, and I think he was born in Weaverville, North Carolina, but he made the statement that there's this Yankee axiom that honesty is the best policy, but he pointed out, he said, no, that's not right. Honesty is not a policy, it's a principle. Principles never change. Policies change when the profits are at risk. And he goes on to say that we in the South have the potential to recreate a civilization that rejects greed and materialism. And he wrote this in 1950, about 1952, 53. It wasn't published till around 68. He said that the world looks to the South and what it sees is the last non-materialistic civilization in the Western world. But most revealing of all is the fear, and this is what the people who want to annihilate us, they fear that the South gestates the revolutionary impulse for the future. You have the potential to create a political revolution, a non-violent political revolution. And your enemies understand that. It's time that we understood that. One of the great failures of the South is that we, the people of the South, and this is something that Weaver said we can't be forgiven for, is that we have given up or surrendered the initiative. We've taken the decision of 1865 too literally. And the South must recover the initiative to the point of not waiting for the Washington or the North's approval. Now listen, scholarly lectures, books, they won't save us. We're at the point of the end of this American civilization, as it were. We're at the point in which our enemies have a declared war against Western Christian civilization. Dr. Sandy Mitchell, who is a member of what camp? McGuire Camp SCV up in West Monroe. A great scholar, and y'all know he's written a number of books. He said, I didn't join the SCV in order to be a member of a Civil War club. I joined the SCV in order to be a part of a movement to restore sanity to the South. And through the South, perhaps we'll save it all. But if we don't, let's at least save our own. We need a Southern movement to reclaim America's original constitutionally limited Christian civilization. We need to put the postmodern neo-Marxists on notice that we will back off no more. We are prepared to go to war, political war, nonviolent war, but we will not surrender the initiative any longer. Those men in gray went to war to prevent the very type of government we are struggling under today. They knew the risk, and so should we. The South should be leading a nonviolent political revolution to reclaim the country and to end the tyranny of the woke elites. Like Patrick Henry, I too declare that what I have first at heart is American liberty, then American union. But liberty always trumps government. Liberty never takes a second seat to, say, Biden's government, say the Supreme Court, say Congress, say the United Nations. Liberty first, and then government. You and I, today, we are at the forks. We are at the crossroads. We're at the point of making a decision. We are headed towards a woke gulag where liberty no longer is tolerated in the slightest, or we are headed for liberty, for a nation reclaimed by a people whose ancient enemies have been attacking us from time immemorial. But we, the people of the South, we are a unique people. We are a special people. We are a people who have the heritage of liberty and freedom, and in your veins flow the blood of the men who fought not only in Gettysburg and Vicksburg and Petersburg, but also who fought at Cowles Pens, who fought at Kings Mountain. We have the blood of men who are determined to regain liberty, and that's our job because we are a unique people destined to be free. God bless the South.